Hey, Coach.
Hey, AJ, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, man. Good. Real good. Real good. How about yourself?
Oh, not bad. Just looking forward to we're getting close here in Illinois on the 26th to open the bowling centers and a lot of other places. So it's going to be cool to get our youth adult league back on the floor and get rocking.
Yeah, I think it's going to be quite outstanding to be able to get back at it. I think we will be opening back up on the 26th as far as the shop goes, but the first will actually be our first starting date, so to speak, to probably as far as getting back in the shop and taking some appointments. We'll start on the July 1st. So it'll open up on the 26th, but we're going to use those days in between from then till the 1st to get a little bit more cleaned up just to make sure things are all good, and then we'll be at it. But we have a cool guest today, Coach.
Oh, I'm so excited. It's great to have this guest today.
Yep, we were able to chat with Verity, Crawley, and she was willing to come on and had some time to be able to sit down with us. So I thought that was kind of cool. Basically, generally, we go through a series of questions to talk with our those that will come through and sit down with us to chat. Verity has many accomplishments in the bowling industry. She's just got a lot of really cool and neat things that she's done throughout her career, and we're going to get kind of down to the nitty gritty with some of it and discuss some of that. And with, I think, no further ado, we should just add her on, Coach.
Yay.
Let's see. There we go.
Hello.
Hey. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great.
Happy
good to
Friday.
See you. Yeah, definitely. Happy Friday.
I had to check that it was Friday just because I'm kind of losing count of my days, but it's Friday.
Somebody asked me that yesterday too. What day is it again?
Yeah, I had to ask someone yesterday, what's the actual date today? Like, no idea. Is it in June? Is it July? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no kidding. It's not. Is it getting warm where you're at right now?
I'm in Florida right now, so it's extremely warm, but it's a typical Florida summer now. So it gets to 4 o'clock and it rains for the rest of the day.
I know that.
But it's warm rain. It's not cold rain, so it's interesting. But I like the heat. I like it. So
that's good. That's good. So we were talking just a little bit before we got on here live with you, and we also stated it a little bit already, but Coach usually likes to get some questions thrown out there at you and let the viewers kind of know you or get to know you a little bit better, basically, I think is how we kind of approach it. And, we know that you're a Kulik staffer, Storm staffer, Kegel, Bowler X staffer, or sponsored by, I suppose, would be a good way to say that. I think that's how you pronounced it in your email. And then Kegel Training also, Kegel Training Center.
And Vice,
Vice, yes, sorry, missed one.
Sorry.
But with no further ado, I think with all that, I think, Coach, if you're ready for your questions, we can shoot.
Absolutely. We only have 20 questions for you to do in an hour.
Only? Whew, okay. Speed fire, rapid round.
Yeah,
so
we really do appreciate you coming on, girl. It's going to be great. Enjoy you being on the show. And I always like to start off with all of our guests. When did you get started bowling?
I started when I was 5 years old. At least that's what I'm told. I obviously don't really remember being 5 years old, but yeah, I was very young, and I remember it happening. Myself and I think my brother went to a birthday party, and I went with him, or me and my parents went to pick him up, not sure. And they had a youth league happening at the same time on a Saturday morning, and we both signed up. That was kind of how it happened, and it just kind of skyrocketed from there. We went every Saturday morning to the youth league and used to bowl 3 games, and they used to have it in different divisions. So obviously I was in like the youngest division, and my brother was in an older division, and I always wanted to be in the same division as him. So I felt like I always wanted to get better just so that I could bowl in the same division as my brother.
Nice. Nice.
I would imagine you got to a point where you could beat your brother.
Yeah, that did kind of happen, and he doesn't bowl anymore. He was a very good bowler too. But unfortunately, when he went to university, he stopped bowling, whereas I continued.
Nice.
Well, that's great. Well, I know that's when you started, but elaborate just a little bit. We can go a little bit further. Once you got out of the junior program, how did you progress to get on up the line as far as your bowling career?
Yeah, so I definitely bowled a lot whilst I was in England as a junior bowler, and I think that's kind of what helped me get to where I am today. I had a lot of experience. I would bowl something every weekend back home in England, whether it was a junior event or an adult event. We didn't have the rules to where you couldn't be a junior competing in adult. So you could compete in an adult event even if you were a junior, you could earn money. We didn't have those kind of rules because we also don't have scholarship or anything like that that's given out to junior bowlers. So the biggest thing that happened was I bowled the European Youth Championships in 2012 in Denmark for Team England, and I bowled very good there. I won a couple of medals. I shot my first 300, and it was kind of that stepping stone for me to where I really performed, and it kind of gave me that confidence. Okay, I am a decent bowler, you know, like I'd had a little bit of success in England, but I felt like I found myself not really winning a whole lot. Like I'd be up there, but I was never the one that really won. You know, I had a couple of medals from some other events, but I bowled that European Youth Championships, and from there everything kind of changed. And that's actually how I moved to the US, because I was contacted by a couple of collegiate coaches, and it kind of put that idea in my mind. Oh, maybe I could go to the US to bowl. So that's kind of how it all happened, and I haven't left since.
Wow, that's terrific. That gets me down to another area of one of our questions is what was it that brought you to the States? And obviously it was the coaches going after you. But backing up a little bit, when you were coming up and being a coach, did you have a coach or an influence that really guided you when you were a young girl in bowling?
So I had three main coaches, I would say, when I was younger. Steve Thornton, John Zadell, and Zara Glover, now Zara Giles. Zara was a phenomenal bowler herself, and I always aspired to be like her a little bit. She had curly hair, she hit the bowling ball, and I kind of saw myself a lot in her, and she was, you know, she was great. I used to have coaching with her, and she just made it fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed practicing because of what she did with me. John Zadell I spent a few years with, and he was actually a coach of Team England, but then he moved away, and I would still go and work with him. And Steve Thornton's been somebody who has coached me my whole life, and I still speak with him. I'm still in contact with him. So those three are really formed me as a bowler, I would say, more than anyone. And, you know, I still speak to them all, and they're all still somewhat involved in bowling. Steve the most.
Wow. And I know you have such a great physical game. When you were coming through your career as a young girl, did a lot of these coaches, and I always like to find out, did they really kind of spend some time with you with your mental game? Because you're such a great competitor and you have such a strong focus when you're on the lanes, is what I noticed. But did you have any mental training in that, or a lot of it in your college career?
I would say I did. So I used to struggle a decent amount mentally. And I used to get very upset after tournaments, and I would chat with my coach about it, and we would kind of evaluate each event. And it was always a very up and down situation. And there was always a discussion about my parents and how can my parents try and help me so that I can make better decisions and I can be more positive. And we kind of got to the point where I felt like I was struggling so much mentally that I actually hired a mental coach. So I worked with a mental coach for a couple of years, and I set goals. And one of my big goals at the time was making Team England. I don't remember for which specific event it was. I would have to go back and look at my notes, but we set all these goals about doing, making a specific team. And I worked with him for a couple of years, and that made a big difference. He gave me some different tips and tricks that I still use today. And then obviously when I was in college, it was kind of mental game was talked about a little bit more. And at Weber, we used to have some sessions with Dr. Dean. So we kind of had the team mental game side of things. I would say in college, there was less about my mental game as an individual, and it was more about how we work together as a team. So then when I left the team atmosphere to bowl on the PWBA, and it was back to being very individual. And I kind of saw some of the issues come up that I had when I was really young, when I was bowling individually. So the last year, I would say I've put in way more work on my mental game than I probably ever have before. And I think that now I feel like mentally I'm in a very good place. And that's why I was very upset when the PWA tour was cancelled this summer, just because I genuinely felt ready in a mental state to compete.
Yeah, I'm so sad that happened. We were going to host a tournament here in Rockford. Wasn't a week or so ago, AJ, here in Cherry Bowl, where Mr. John Summer, who a lot of you don't know, is the originator of the ladies tour in the 80s. And he was very excited to have the girls back, but we'll see. We'll get you back on the lanes. And I know the guys are. I hope so too.
Definitely.
I'm sure you were really, really prepared and looking ready to go. But like I say, whenever you were on Team England, had such a great career and success. So you probably already know the answer to this question, but what was it that made you decide to move to the States? What happened to get you to really, okay, I'm going to come over?
I think so. I had applied to university in England and I wasn't really set on it. I didn't know what I wanted to study. So I picked a degree that I wasn't wholeheartedly into. And back home, university is a little different. You go to study one specific thing and you spend 4 years studying that specific thing. Whereas I feel like in the US, you pick a major. If you want to change it, it's no big deal. You can change it. You take all of these general elective classes. So part of me already kind of knew that I didn't see myself studying what I'd applied to study at university. But I got a place, and it just kind of, I knew I always wanted to bowl. And in the back of my mind, I knew that if I went to university in England, it was going to be very hard for me to bowl full time with the degree that I was going to be studying. So as soon as I kind of had that content or that contact with the US, and Sid Allen, one of the best coaches in the world, was actually who put me in contact with Del Warren. And I sent some videos to Sid, and he sent them to Del Warren, the head coach at Weber, and it kind of skyrocketed from there. And I thought, wow, I'll be in Florida. It's nice and sunny there, so I would quite like to go. I'd like to have the opportunity to bowl at the Kegel Training Center. And in that aspect, it was a no-brainer because I wanted to bowl. And I spoke to a lot of people when I was making my decision. I was unsure whether I should do it. I didn't know if it was the right thing for me. And every single bowler that I spoke to in England wished that they had had that opportunity when they were my age. And they said, Verity, if you don't go and do this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And that was kind of something that stuck with me. And I thought, it's 4 years. If I hate it, I can do a year and come back. There was nothing that was necessarily tying me there if I didn't like it. If I went for 2 months and I didn't like it, I could come home. And my parents really supported me in that aspect of things. So yeah, it was a very quick turnaround in terms of I made the decision at the end of April and I was at Weber in August.
Wow, you mentioned Sid Allen, and I know a little bit about Kegel. Whenever we got it started back in the late 90s, and I really got an introduction to Sid, and what a world-class coach. And his mental game, his teaching of the mental game was just phenomenal. And his international coaching experience in Malaysia for so many years, and such a big, you remember that with Charlene Zulkifli and all of that group.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt about it. The training center, which I was fortunate enough to get started with Mr. Davis, you made such a wonderful decision, and world-class coaches. Good. Yeah. I love Del Warren, Randy Stoughton, and Rick, and Ruben now. Yeah. So you really had one of the world-class training centers to be in every day. And I want to ask you about one of the bowlers in there, but I'll save that for a little bit. A pretty good bowler there at Kegel.
Okay.
But yeah, and what did you decide as far as you ended up with your major in your studies?
So I ended up studying sports business management.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. That's something that you had aspired to look at whenever you were deciding to come over when you came into Weber?
I didn't really know what I wanted to study, so it was more of I studied sport at our version of high school, I guess. It's not called high school, and it's all a bit complicated, but we have 4 main subjects that we study in our last year, and sport was one of those. So to me, I was like, oh yeah, I think I could do that. And looking back, I wish I'd understood what a minor was. I didn't really have any concept of major, minor, what any of that was. I was like, oh, I just need to get a degree. So I wish that I'd done a minor in marketing, looking back on it. But at the same time, I enjoyed what I learned, and I definitely am happy with the degree. And I would say after I graduated, I took a year where I actually worked at a law firm. So I wasn't really using my degree. Obviously, since then, I've gone into coaching. So I would say that I am using my degree now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some information and video that Dell did to advertise Weber, and it's such a great small community. And I know I used to be in Sebring, where we originally started Kegel, and then we moved up to the big facility in Lake Wales. And that relationship with that university has been phenomenal for Dell and Randy. And I'm sure when you took the tour, I've had so many other kids that I've known that have gone to that program. The school is pretty cool. It's pretty laid back. There's not that many students, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's something that makes Weber a little bit special, is because it's so small, you have such a good connection with your professors. I mean, I had a relationship with every one of my professors, whereas if I'd have gone to a big university where you're in a big lecture hall with 1,000 people, you're just kind of a number to them. But to them, they knew that I was Verity. I have some of them on Facebook now, and they'll comment on some of my bowling stuff. Just simple things like that. It was just a very different environment. Obviously, there are less students, so you kind of tend to know everyone. The bowlers were known as the bowlers. And the campus definitely, I mean, it's not the nicest campus ever. I've definitely been to a lot nicer campuses, but it has a very nice lake. It has a very nice pool. In terms of like classrooms, I didn't love it just because it was very basic. And I lived in the dorms for 1 year, and then I lived off campus for the rest in a house that I rented with some of the other bowlers that I could walk to because I didn't have a car at the time. But it was a great experience. And I mean, Kegel makes it, regardless of how the university was going to be, I wanted to bowl. So being able to go to Kegel Training Center every day and then go at the weekends if I wanted to bowl, it was a no-brainer.
Yes, it is a no-brainer, because I can attest to that whenever they were developing that program and building the facility, and the times that they put the topography and things like that were so cool that you could work on. And of course, all the great coaches over there. I know whenever you, after a while back, I remember reading about you, you took a position at Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. And I was excited to hear about that. I didn't know that school had a bowling program where they were developing one.
Yeah, so I will Dusty said hi, so I wanted to say hi to Dusty. And then John just asked about bowling centers in England and Europe. And I would say that there's definitely not as many bowling centers, at least in England, as there are in the US. Bowling's not as big as it is here. A lot of our bowling centers in England just actually turned to string pins. So that was kind of a controversial kind of little aspect. And Stu says beer is universal. Honestly, that is true. There is, I don't know if it still exists, but there was a little university tour for bowling. So, but it was people to where they could literally, they would throw a house ball and house shoes, and they would go to this little tournament and drink, so collegiate bowling opened up a completely different mindset for me. Even coming to the US, I had no idea what collegiate bowling was. I didn't know. I knew what Baker was, obviously, but I didn't know how we would bowl. Okay, we're going to bowl 5 team games, then we're going to go bowl 20 Baker games. Like, what is that? So yeah, that was definitely an experience. But yes, SCAD. They didn't have a bowling program until 4 years ago. So Katie Thornton, who I was very close with whilst I was at Weber, she quickly became one of my really good friends, and I lived with her for a couple of years whilst we were still in the program. I had 1 year of bowling with her, and then she was the assistant coach for a year. So she started the program, and I knew that it was going to be a good program just for the fact that she has so much passion for the sport. And she loves it. She doesn't necessarily bowl as much anymore, but just how much she cares for each athlete, I knew that program was going to be special. Obviously, both of us coming from Weber, or at least from her when she started the program, I knew that parts of Weber were kind of going to be integrated into that program. And it's kind of exciting to where she could form it brand new from the beginning and exactly mold it as to how she wanted to be. So she had a year of competition without an assistant coach, which for her was extremely difficult because it was literally just her running the program. So SCAD has both a men's and a women's team, and Katie was in charge of both. So, she couldn't necessarily go to the same tournament with the men and the women because there wasn't enough manpower for her to be able to deal with both teams. So both teams made it to nationals that first year, and the team had a very successful first year. She managed to get some very good recruits to come in, and after that first year they decided that they would like to hire a part-time assistant, and I was just so happened timing wise, I was looking for a job at the time, and it had to be related to bowling due to my visa. That's a whole nother pain, but yeah, so I applied for the job and I had interviews and I got the job, and it kind of all just went on from there, and it's been amazing. I mean, the team has flourished. It's now one of the top teams in the nation, and they've had a lot of success.
Due to the great coaching, right?
Yeah, I think obviously we have some great players. It's not all down to the coaching. We definitely have recruited some very good players, don't get me wrong, and they've come to the program as good bowlers. But obviously I still believe that even if you have the best bowlers in the world, if you put them in a 5-man team, they're not necessarily going to succeed just because they're the best bowlers. So it definitely has a lot to do with the teamwork and the culture that we have kind of integrated into the program, and obviously the way they practice together and just the way that the team learn to get to know each other, I think makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I can't tell you how exciting it was to be a team coach. And for a while there, back in the old days, I was able to coach the junior national team USA, and we had some Deandras Beatty at the time and some of the great young kids back in those days. But team unity was such an important part of the bowling world, and it is so different than being individual. But I know coming from Weber and the great mental game training, and like a lot of other colleges with Dr. Dean, is such an important thing to bond as a team. And I know that that's such a key. Whenever I would watch the matches, and the college bowling was just phenomenal. And Dell had a thing the other day I saw where his experience in life is to be able to work with the team of coaching and the aspect of how you guys are affected and it affects his life. So it's a great unity. I understand that. Can you tell us about a bowler that you bowled with recently in Fort Myers that happens to be one of my very dear friends? And you posted, I think, and I saw that. And John Janowitz is one of the best bowlers in the world.
Yes.
And I absolutely remember when JJ walked into the training center, and this guy, JJ would come, "Hey, how you doing? It's good to see you again." I mean, we love JJ. I know him better than most people. He bowled phenomenal. I couldn't imagine the scores. I can't imagine how he bowled. But how did that day go about it? I don't know how you did it too.
It was fun. So we were actually bowling on the same pair together. We both signed up and asked, can we bowl in the same lane? I practiced a lot with JJ, and I'm very grateful to have access to his knowledge because he is phenomenal. I definitely learn a lot from him, and I definitely have to give him a lot of credit for my bowling because he has taught me a lot. But yeah, so we were bowling together, and it was very funny because we have 10 minutes of practice or whatever it is before the tournament starts, and I don't think JJ struck at all in practice, right? 10 pin after 10 pin after 10 pin. With about 2 minutes left to go, he goes out to the car, brings in a different bowling ball. That's the bowling ball he starts with. We both start off that first game. We would have been a phenomenal doubles team because we both had front 9. And we're like, oh, this is good. So JJ's first, so he shoots 300. Verity doesn't quite shoot 300. But yeah, just to watch him, I think to me it just blew my mind how his look in practice wasn't that great, and it looked like he wasn't going to strike much. And then literally all he did was strike all day. And it was just like he had a magnet to the pocket. And I bowled good, but I got really stuck on one game where we were bowling on a house shot. So obviously they were a little bit easier, but they got very cliffed. They had very wet dry, and I got very stuck when it came to that. And JJ was just shot 270 like the wet dry was nothing, because he just fully understands what to do. He sees the ball motion and he knows exactly what ball to go to. I'm there going through 5 different bowling balls, over analyzing everything, when all I needed to do was slow down. But he has those answers, and it's very cool to see. And it was a shame because he didn't end up winning the tournament. He led qualifying by averaging 270, and then it came down to a step ladder. So I made it to the step ladder, but it ended up that he lost in the final match, and he shot 190, which had not even been in his equation for the whole tournament. But he obviously just got a little stuck that game, and maybe in his own head, I don't know. But yeah, it was a shame to see him not win the event. In my mind, he won. And I think everyone else would have given him the trophy and not even had the step ladder.
I understand. I know our sport, we qualify, and there's so many numbers where you lead by 300 pins, and unfortunately, on the match that you have, you just can't get it together, and it doesn't happen. But it's just the way the game is, and I've seen that over the years with pro bowling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how did you keep busy when you had to stay home during this pandemic? What did you do? I know we all miss bowling so much. What did you do to stay busy and sane?
I found so many things to do, but when I try and explain what I did, I'm not really sure. I did set up a little bowling lane in the lounge, so I put down some cushions and towels and pillows so that I could still practice. I obviously didn't know how long this whole quarantine thing was going to last, so I kind of wanted to get my hand used to being in a bowling ball, because I was so set that we were going to have a tour to go back to. So I was like, if I'm going to only have 2 weeks to practice before my first PWBA event, I need to be ready. So I was swinging the bowling ball and I was doing my drills just to kind of stay in it. So I did that. I worked out a lot. I started doing yoga. I did a 30-day yoga challenge to try and, stretch and just spend a little bit more time on myself than I normally had. It was actually really nice to have some extra time to just relax. That was something at the beginning of the year I definitely didn't do enough of. Felt like I was constantly on the go, from being at the office to coaching to practicing myself to working out. I was always on the go. So it was really nice to actually have some time to just sit down. And I was reading a lot of books, especially at the beginning of quarantine. I would sit out in the morning and actually make breakfast, which is something that normally I meal prep like crazy. So I'd normally have my breakfast made for the week, and you get so bored of eating the same thing over and over. To simply just have some egg on toast was quite enjoyable. So yeah, and I did decide that I wanted to do something productive, and I also wanted to still stay within bowling. So I set up a Patreon page where I could help coach and just help give people some extra information. I obviously have learned a lot over my career, and I wanted to be able to share that with people in a little bit of a different place. It is a subscription platform where people pay for the information, but it was just kind of different. I don't get to produce a lot of that content on, say, Facebook or Instagram, and I don't think that the social media is the right platform for it. So I set up this Patreon. I learned how to use Photoshop so that I could make some, just different kind of images that can either be printed out or, just different graphics with some educational content. So that's kind of been what's been keeping me the most busy, just because I've been creating some different content and coming up with different ideas for that. Yeah, that's been it really.
Nice.
Wow. Whenever you in Savannah, which I'm very familiar with, being from Atlanta, it's a beautiful city. It's an older town with a river, and unfortunately, the St. Patty's Day parade, was canceled down there for the river. But is there a specific area? Where did you guys train, and what was the bowling center down in there that you worked with your team? I don't remember the city very well.
Yeah, so Savannah College of Art and Design is actually spread throughout downtown Savannah, but them themselves, they do not own a bowling center. So we used to practice around 15 to 20 minute drive from downtown Savannah at a place called AMF Savannah. So just the local bowling center in Savannah. And we would practice there. We had a very good relationship with them. Katie and I would create, or still do create, a schedule to where we would have the lanes dressed with a specific pattern every day. We had specific times that we would come in that go along with the team's class schedule. So yeah.
Nice.
Sounds like a cool place to train. AJ, now that I don't want to sidetrack here, but we have something that one of our, I think our boss came up with here to ask you about, as far as we were talking about breakfast a little bit, AJ. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's bacon.
Yeah. I have a few questions, and I'll just leave it with Coach let in with it. I've heard that you have an interest in bacon. Is this true?
It is true. Okay, my camera's gonna move a tiny bit, but I'm gonna have to show you because it doesn't tend to come out on the video. But I'm gonna show you a pack that I have in my freezer.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Okay, so you see how it's actually meat.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There you go.
I'll be right back.
That is so fun. Yeah. Did he said something about sending you 6 pounds of it or something at some point?
Yes. Yeah. I was very, very surprised. See, look, there's no meat on that.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's like a lot of fat.
Well, this is extra thick. It has to be extra thick for me. So.
There you go. There you go. That's
But
so
yeah,
funny.
I got a package one day with all of this bacon, and literally, you know what a kid on Christmas is like? You know, like a 4-year-old kid when they run down the stairs and they see that Santa's been. That was literally Verity when I opened up all of this bacon that I got. So happy.
It's funny. It makes me think of Bobby Flay, because we watch a lot of Bobby Flay shows when if at night we're trying to wind down from obviously the pandemic. We're watching some TV at night sometimes a little bit more often than usual. And so, like Bobby Flay, every time he goes up against somebody in his little thing, it's always got to have some form of bacon in there. And I'm like, it's like cheating. It's a guaranteed win, you feel like, because it's going to be like the awesome result of how good it should taste.
Yeah, but no, it's definitely worth a try. If you search for an English shop or anything, there's a lot of local British places that do sell English bacon, and obviously there's online shops as well, but it's definitely worth a try. It's saltier than regular bacon. I think that's why I like it, but I also I like that it's meat. I mean, I really like ham, and I guess similar idea of ham or like a very thin pork slice. It just has a very specific taste, but it is quite salty.
I suppose.
It's quite healthy. Oh, okay.
No, salty. She said salty.
Salty. It's probably healthier than American bacon because there is less fat.
Yeah.
But I can't guarantee that without looking it up.
Right. Yeah. Make sure there's some facts behind that, right?
Yeah. Sure. Go ahead, AJ.
That's too funny. So another part of this is we usually kind of spear off a little bit, kind of throw out Bowler Smart as one of the sponsors of our thing that we do through our show. But it is it's accenting something that you're a part of, which is Storm. If you could go to our website and pick up the new Storm Axiom ball. I know there's some other releases that have come out since then, but I feel like this is one of them that never really got some traction for the brand because it was kind of before the COVID stuff kind of hit. Have you thrown this one?
I have, yes. And I actually have a very cool Storm video of me throwing it that maybe I'll reshare on my page so that everyone can see it. But yeah, I think I like this ball so much because I really like the Phase 2, which I think everyone knows that the Phase 2 is my favorite Storm ball, but it complements the Phase 2 very well. And I think that's one of a big benefit of that ball for me is because I know I can throw the Phase 2 and then I know I can go to the Axiom right after. And, if the Phase 2 isn't quite enough, I can just start with the Axiom.
Cool. Yeah, it means that you and Coach are both Storm staffers. I always try to make sure that we catch our staffers that are joining us to show off some of their stuff. So if you haven't gotten one, go out and grab one of those. And yeah.
Yeah, so I highly suggest it.
There you go. We asked Liz the last one we did for Liz. She had thrown it, I think, but I don't know if she had really thrown it enough. And I'm sure you've got a little more access to throwing at the Kegel Training Center. It looks like we saw some video of you recently, a little bit more kind of being able to get down there and do that. So
yeah, I've been very lucky the last couple of weeks since Kegel opened back up. I've been able to bowl. And I've also, Florida's kind of getting back to normal. So there's been a lot of local tournaments. Every weekend there is something to bowl and everyone seems to want to bowl. So there's been a good amount of entries too. So I'm very lucky that I've had that access to be able to get back into competitive bowling.
Nice. Then the next one, we're going to throw a couple of potential questions up here. These are from people that are actually paying attention to the show here. So Bob Kubiak, hope I didn't crush that. I'm sure you can read away there and see if there's anything.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for asking. It does come in front of my face, so it finishes about here in front of my face. And I've always done it. I watched a video of myself from 2008, and I used to have this insane follow through that literally came all the way across my body, which was a little bit too much. That was because my head moved a little bit too much and I just had way too much body movement. But now it's a little bit more on the inside of my body.
Nice. Is it something that you think that some of the coaches basically teach with some of the
I don't think so. I've never heard anyone say that try and do the follow through inside of your face. I think what a lot of the time it comes from is from focusing on having your elbow on the inside. So especially when you do foul line drills and you can really focus on that elbow being on the inside, it's kind of happens from that. And for me, it happens a lot because I'm on the inside, but then as I go to release it, I'm quite on the side of the ball. So as I, have my unload motion, as that happens, my arm then my elbow wants to go back on the inside. So that's kind of the motion that takes place.
Yeah, I kind of figured, and I thought that would be something that would be really nice for people to understand how that kind of happens. The next question, before Coach gets back into his questions.
Okay. Hello, John. I would say the first day back that I bowled after quarantine, I'd had a decent break. And before quarantine happened, I was injured. So I actually hadn't been bowling as much then either. So it'd been a good time off for me. And it felt very weird. The biggest thing is that I was searching for some perfect feel that I didn't feel right away. So then I got very frustrated. But I didn't necessarily have to make any changes. But I felt like it was a very good time to make changes. I knew that when I got back to bowling, I knew that the tour wasn't going to be happening in the 2 weeks that I had hoped. So I kind of went on that mindset, okay, if I'm going to change anything physically, I should be changing it right now. So I did make a couple of changes, definitely, I think, for the better, but nothing too drastic, but enough to where, I had to put in a lot of reps to kind of work on it. And I would say my hands changed a tiny bit, but nothing to where I needed to change all of my grips or change my thumbs or anything like that. And I think that is really because I'd been bowling at home. If I hadn't have been having my hand in the bowling ball and being used to it, then my span probably would have felt a little bit off.
Yeah, I think you kind of addressed that when you came through with Tom Hess to our little thing. We had talked about that a little bit too. So it's always good to check it out for sure. So especially with this kind of going on, it's not a bad time to check.
Yeah, and especially I think that a lot of people have been using this time off to maybe work out more, and I've seen a lot of posts of people losing weight, and I think that makes a huge bit difference to your fit. If you're losing weight around your stomach area, then obviously you're losing weight on your arms and on your hand as well. So it's definitely something to pay attention to, and kind of maybe instead of just going right back into bowling, just get your span checked beforehand. Visit your local pro shop and kind of get that done and out of the way before you try and go back into bowling.
Absolutely. Coach, that kind of does it for questions. I mean, we got one more, but we can sneak that one back in when we get past your next couple. So.
Wow, I didn't know that you had an injury. What happened?
I'm not entirely sure what happened. I was very sick at the beginning of the year, which I thought it started off as just, a regular cold and sore throat, and it kind of just got worse and worse. And then I thought I was getting better. And every time I would cough or sneeze, I had a very sharp pain in the side of my body. And they told me that it was some inflammation in my ribs, which I'm still not 100% sure if that's exactly what it was, or if it was a muscle strain in between the ribs. I don't know, but it took from February until about a month ago for it to It still causes me a little bit of bother. Like I still feel it every now and then when I work out, but it was to the point where in February I bowled a tournament, or I nearly bowled a tournament. I bowled the 10 minutes of practice and I was in so much pain that I had to withdraw. And I've never done that before. And normally I would just, if you've ripped your thumb, you just push through it and you just deal with it. But I literally could not throw the ball down the lane, and the whole 10 minutes of practice I felt like I was taking some painkiller every shot, because I was just trying to figure out, how am I going to get this ball down the lane? And my boyfriend was like, you really shouldn't bowl. And I'm like, but I need to bowl. Like, I need the practice. I just drilled some bowling balls, and obviously I was getting ready for tour, so in my mind I'm like, I have to bowl. Like, I have to see how these balls look. Like, I have to learn the equipment. And he's like, Verity, you're not bowling. Like, I'm like, honestly, I don't even know where I would stand right now. Like, I don't know where to throw the bowling ball. So I withdrew, and I had like gone to the doctors after that. So yeah, it wasn't enjoyable. I spent a lot of time just laying, doing nothing, because I couldn't even sit up. I was so uncomfortable to do anything. So I think the quarantine was kind of a blessing in disguise for me, because I wouldn't have been ready for the tour. Come the end of April, I was still in pain, so I don't know how I would have been bowling a lot and being ready for competition. So quarantine definitely gave me the break that I think I needed, and the time off that I needed. I was just hoping that by now I would be able to be back competing on tour, but at least I have some events to bowl, and it's not the end of the world.
Wow, that's pretty rough. That doesn't sound, when you were talking about coughing and chest pain, I'm going, wait a minute now, this may be something a little bit different, but
and honestly, it could have been COVID. Looking back on it, I've obviously read some articles of symptoms of COVID, and it made me feel like, well, maybe I genuinely had that in February when it wasn't known about. So obviously there wasn't a test for it back then that the doctors could have said, oh yeah, this is COVID and the ribs is one of your symptoms. And I've seen a couple of articles where people have said about, rib issues with COVID. So in my mind, I feel like I had it, but I obviously can't. I don't know if I did. But yeah, it wasn't very enjoyable, that's for sure.
That was, not to interrupt, Coach, but I feel like a lot of us had something going on at some point, at least around here, previous to it actually getting announced to happen. So I mean, I think there's a lot of people that think that they may have already had it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I know so many people that were sick at the beginning of the year, but it's just everyone, you normally at some point during the year you have a cold, you have a sore throat, and you just think it's normal. And that's kind of where I was. But it was the fact of, it took me a long time to recover from being sick, which I just attributed to the fact that I was traveling for college. Like, I went to the Hoosier with SCAD, and I felt like I wasn't human, and I felt like I was not present at that event because I was just so sick. And I'm stood there like a zombie, like, what am I doing? And I remember walking past Randy Stoughton, he was coaching Weber, and he was like, Verity, you look like death. And like, I genuinely felt it. And I was like, I don't know how I'm here, and that schedule is so grueling that I never recovered from being sick. And that's probably where the rib issue came from, because I was coughing so much, and I didn't get the right medicine. I didn't go to the doctors or anything. I just took some Dayquil and thought everything was going to be fine like it normally was. But it kind of hit me that rest is a little bit more important, and I think that's where quarantine, I tried to rest a little more and take care of myself.
Absolutely.
Good advice from your boyfriend. Great guy.
Yeah,
no kidding.
Yeah. In the middle of the problems there, I think every time I would feel a little warm, I would run with a thermometer and hit myself and go, okay, 98.6, 99.4. And I was always really kind of being fearful that I'm going to be that way. But fortunately, we were pretty cool. We were all right. So now that the ladies tour has been, called off, and I don't even like to bring it up, it's so disappointing. What are your plans now as to when do you get back to school and teaching? What's going on?
So teaching is supposed to return in September. I can go back to work. It's a very weird situation because I get 3 months off with my job. So my 3 months off are set for the tour. So like right now, I'm not working because that SCAD isn't working because of everything that's going on. But in a normal world, I wouldn't be working the months of the tour. So I wouldn't go back to work until September. So that should all be normal as long as the whole COVID situation doesn't change anything. that I don't really know, but I'm planning up until then to bowl everything that I can. I have the Lucy coming up in July, which is the next big event that I'm preparing for. Luckily,
Right.
Florida does have something every weekend, so I am bowling every weekend. And whether I would like to try and bowl some PBA events, depending on kind of when and where they fall.
Nice.
That would be really cool. I mean, just to see you out there on that tour. Oh man,
Yeah.
that would be exciting. I know you had probably planned in your ladies tour travels a lot of the cities. I would imagine you were going to go full time, obviously.
Yeah.
Storm.
Yeah. I mean, I was planning on bowling, the whole women's tour. So I had everything booked for at least the first half of the year. My whole June and August was planned for the PWBA tour. So now I kind of have to look at what other events there are. Normally I'm not around to bowl the regular events. So now all of these events are popping up. I'm like, oh, I've never heard of this before. And everyone's like, well, they have it every year, but normally I'm on tour, so I don't know about it. So now I'm just kind of looking into other events and figuring out what else I can bowl. And I plan on, maybe doing some coaching in the local area, and I'm doing a clinic with Kegel in August. So I'll have a few little things like that will be really nice to be able to do too, that I don't normally have time to do during the summer because of traveling.
Yeah, I understand. And I know that you would be very competitive on the men's tours. There's no doubt about it, because you can play any part of the lane with your wonderful game. You can play the first board. You can play over the gutter. You're just so phenomenal. Great bowler. You can play any part of the lane. I'm telling you, you're great.
Thank you. Yeah, I bowled the men's US Open last year when it was in North Carolina. And after bowling that, it gave me that want to really bowl some of the men's event, just because I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I also enjoyed watching the men compete. I mean, obviously I'm used to bowling next to the best female bowlers in the world, but to look and see Belmo and Norm Duke, I'm like, oh, I would quite like to experience this a little bit more and learn from them. And kind of, obviously the lanes break down completely different. And I think that it suits my game a little bit more sometimes than the way the women play the lane do. So it definitely makes me want to compete a little bit more with the men. So I normally bowl the regionals that are around me. So I have that little bit of experience, but I want to try and bowl some of the men's stuff if I can.
Yeah, I know the Southern region has some phenomenal players down there. Being a Southern boy, it's very competitive. And like you said, in Florida, there's every weekend. It's in South Florida and Orlando and all those guys. It's just such a wonderful place to have tournament bowling. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Mark, my favorite doubles partner. I do thoroughly enjoy bowling with my boyfriend. I'm bowling with him this weekend. And any local doubles event, I'll always bowl with him. For the Lucy, I'm bowling with Wes Malott. So obviously, I mean, you can't go wrong bowling with Wes Malott. But yeah, no, both of them. And I would actually really enjoy bowling with John Janowitz as well, just because there's just so much information and so much to learn from him. So those three are definitely my go-to partners.
Not to get too sidetracked supposedly, but JJ, when I was at the Team USA this year trying out, got a chance to stand next to him, and I've known him for a little while too. Just you know him a little more than I do, but we're sitting there, and his conversation was, I changed to every ball I had, and I shot 215 with every ball. It didn't matter, but I'm watching all these kids, and they're 240, 250, 260. It didn't matter what I did. It was 215 the whole way across. I could do it with any ball. He's just so funny. He's a great person to be around.
Yeah, no, he really is. He's a great person, let alone being a great bowler. He's just a genuinely lovely human being.
Absolutely.
Wonderful guy.
John had another.
Okay. So as far as I know, there's not many women two-handed bowlers. There's a couple coming through in Sweden that have been quite successful, but as of, on tour, there aren't any. And collegiately, I'm starting to see a few more females, but I would say it's definitely not as popular as it is on the men's side. I enjoy coaching two-handed bowling just because I think it's great. I mean, to see what they can do to a bowling ball is pretty phenomenal. We have a couple of two-handed bowlers at SCAD, and we'll have a couple of more, or another one this year as well.
Very nice. Very nice.
I would love to see a competitive ladies team with all of you two-handed. I think that would be so cool.
Yeah, it would be. I feel like it obviously takes a little bit more toll on the body for females. And I feel like that's realistically, it probably doesn't make as much sense long term. So in that aspect, is it really worth it? I don't know. But I personally am quite happy being one-handed, that I wouldn't even consider being two-handed. And I don't think as a female bowler, it's really needed. You know, on the men's side, if it ups your rev rate that much, then okay, maybe it's more beneficial, and that's probably why a lot of young guys start to do it right now. But on the women's side, you see so many bowlers that are successful that don't have as much rev rate. So in that aspect, it's probably not needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Rev rate's a great thing to have, but one of the things that I asked Liz last week was, as far as physical game and our sport, what's one of the keys to be competitive? Not, we know mental game, but as far as the tactical part, if you were going to give advice to a young girl who aspires to join the tour, be at your level, what would you advise her to work on in her game?
I think it would be two things. I think I would say spare shooting for one, which I know is probably one of the most common answers. But
Absolutely.
It is crazy to think how many more pins you can earn if you just learn to make your spares. And if you learn to get count on a split versus trying to shoot the split every time, so that you then miss the cut by 2 pins because, you know, you didn't get the count. Just those simple things. And it's difficult because spare shooting, I feel like, is something that, okay, this kid's going to junior gold, what are you telling them to work on? Spare shooting. So you kind of get fed up of hearing it. But I think until the player fully believes how important the spare shooting is, you know, that's where it comes from. And as a professional, I've definitely felt like at times, if my spare shooting had just been 1% better, then, you know, maybe that would have made the difference. And I think a lot of times that does make the difference, because if you're shooting your spares, you're more confident. If you're more confident, you're going to strike more, then you shoot less spares. So that, and physically wise, I think a straight swing fixes everything. I mean, if you can get that swing straight, you can play all parts of the lane. So I think that's definitely something that is good for people to work on.
Absolutely. I think there's a seminar. One of the things that Dale's got coming up in the course he teaches is direction. And there's nothing more, and Randy was talking about that too in some of his broadcasts, as far as direction and swing alignment is just such a key. And you know that too.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me how much your direction is influenced by your setup. You know, the direction that your hips and your shoulders are facing completely influences where that ball is going to go. And I think there's a lot of people that don't really realize that. You know, they don't realize, well, if I'm pushing really far to the right or I'm pushing really far to the left, well, that's going to affect my swing. And it's interesting how everyone tries to work on release, or they try and work on their swing by thinking about the swing. And that's the worst thing that you can do. If you can just sort your start position and get your push away going in the correct direction, then it really fixes everything. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, and you know, bringing up those two topics, I know last week, you know, AJ, I think the same question I gave to Liz was the same one. And what did she say?
She gave the exact same answer.
Same answer.
Wow.
It was the same answer. It's been the same answer, I think, most of the time you've asked any of the pros that we've had on. And I think that's really the ideal thing that most of the kids need to hear, I think. And even if it is over and over and it gets tiring hearing it, it's just one of those things that if you don't catch that one spare, I mean, I know that I've finished even one game out striking out, but the striking out didn't matter. I still missed by a pin, and I missed a spare somewhere that cost me probably.
I do feel like the spare shooting goes along with the mental game, though, because I feel like a lot of the time we psych ourselves out of the spares. So if you haven't worked on your mental game, then it's kind of irrelevant. You know, you can go to practice and you can shoot 10 pins in a row and you'll make them every time. But if you get to the tournament and you tell yourself, well, I'm going to miss that 10 pin, then of course you're going to miss it. So a lot of the time I think that although, yes, you need to work on your spare shooting in practice to have that confidence that you know how to make them, you have to work on your mental game so that you're strong enough to have the confidence in an event that you're going to make it. And just to keep things simple, I mean, I think that's one of the things that I've really learned is on tour, I would overthink things. You know, I'm like, oh my God, I have to make this 10 pin. Or you think too much about making the spare versus just standing up on the lane and shooting it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think that it comes with time, don't you think? I mean, as far as the amount of effort that you put into these events, you know, the events to go by, if you, as time goes on, that balance starts to balance. I mean, everything starts to balance out because you've seen it before, or you've done it before. Oh, I've done this already. This isn't a big thing anymore as much as it once was.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about experience in the end, you know. 3 years ago, I probably still would have said spare shooting is important, but I wouldn't have tied it to the mental game. I would have just said, well, I just need to practice my spares more. You know, I would just say that, well, I'm not good enough at making my spares in practice. But now I say that I might not be good enough at my spares because it's all mental game, you know, and that's where I think as bowlers, we just evolve and we learn so much about ourselves. And it's okay giving tips to youngsters, and I'm happy to do that. And I want to be able to help, but sometimes the only way you're going to really take that advice is just by experiencing I can't speak, experiencing it yourself. You know, it's like losing. That's some of the best experience that you can get, and it just has to happen. That's
it is.
You know, there's a lot of young kids that I know in qualifying, and they leave the Greek church, and all they need to do is get count. And they, you know, they try to go for it, and they get 1 pin, and then they miss the cut by 3 pins. So you know how that works. So it's such an important thing. But before we get to Paul, oh yeah, well you can wait, Paul, because we know you.
I'll pop up here in a second. So just remind me.
Go ahead, bring it back up. Bring it back up, Jay. Bring Paul back up. Can you get him? Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, so bowling superstitions. I have one main one, which I actually made a YouTube video on, and it's about the flower that I wear in my hair.
Yep.
So that's one superstition. And pre-shot routine, I am obsessed with air and I'm obsessed with rosin. So I have a routine to where, you know, I wipe my ball, then I get my rosin, then I get my air, then I get my rosin. Then I pound my rosin like it has to be on a flat surface, and I like hit my hand against it, and then I slide my foot on the approach, and then I'm good to go. And if something goes messed up in that pre-shot routine, then I have to redo it. You know, so if someone interrupts me, or if something happens, I put that ball down and I restart my pre-shot routine, just because it gives me that comfort. So.
That's funny. No, that's good. Yeah, I think that's a reference to the video that you had for your flower, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's worth a watch. I mean, a lot of people obviously ask me, why do I wear the flower in my hair? And I just felt like, well, I'll just make a video and tell people why I wear the flower in my hair, because there is a story behind it. So I kind of just wanted to be able to share that with everyone. And I made my logo this year, and it incorporates the flower. So they kind of go hand in hand.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, I've seen so many for me, and a lot of times, of course, you wipe your ball off. A lot of bowlers don't wipe their ball off at all. But if I'm wiping the ball off, it's got to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's just me. So
yeah, everyone's different. Everyone has their specific little things that they do, and I like it. Every athlete, you know, has their kind of routine.
Whenever you're in the clutch situation and you're on the approach, and you may have to have a fill or make the 10 pin, or you know, get double and count, and you're really into the intense part of that moment on the TV show, which is so tough on the TV show with the lights and everything. What do you do before you go with that shot? Is it breathing? How do you control your emotions, or what do you do to come through in the shot?
Definitely breathing. For me, breathing is huge, and it's actually something that I practice. So every evening before I sleep, I tend to listen to a meditation tape or a mental rehearsal tape, and both of those include a breathing routine, so that I can actually practice doing that deep breathing. I can practice getting relaxed, so that when I go to compete, or even when I'm practicing, that breathing becomes a little bit more normal to me, and I know it's going to work. I know it's going to relax me because I've actually practiced doing it. So for me, I tend to think too much, so that breathing stops me from thinking. You know, if a thought comes into my mind about needing to strike or about needing something for that last shot, if I take that deep breath, kind of resets me, I forget about it, and I can have a clear head just going to execute the shot. The other thing that, if I feel like I have too much running through my head and, you know, I'm almost too worked up or I'm a little anxious about the shot, I will sing a song to myself.
Right.
And that stops me from thinking about that shot I need to make. And I'm just thinking about the song, you know, I'm singing those lyrics in my head and everything else kind of disappears because I just have that song in my head.
Yeah, I know a problem that I had many years ago before I met Dr. Dean was I would say, don't pull it. And of course my brain would do, and I would definitely pull it. Why don't you just, Dr. Dean said, why don't you just say, make a good shot? And so that makes a lot better sense. But, you know, and the pre-shot routine is so important that you talked about. And, you know, I know a lot of bowlers slap the back of their heel. You know, it seems to be very prevalent whenever they want to check to be sure they're not going to stick. But that's a pretty popular one of them too.
Yeah, I do that too. But the reason I actually do that is because sometimes I feel like I slide too much and I feel like there's a lot of dirt that comes on the floor of the bowling center, whether that's from people using rosin, whether it's dust, AC, whatever it is. So every time I like to wipe my shoe to make sure that, you know, that there isn't any dirt on there. So I'm not going to slide extra.
Was it very hard to change over?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of easy spot. Yeah.
You've changed some shoes over the last so many months, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, so when I was in college, I wore Dexter shoes. And then when KR came out with the hammer shoes, I did change to those. So for me, I've always kind of grown up in Dexter shoes. So I was very comfortable going back to them. They're definitely not as soft as the KR shoes. So I had to break them in more than you would have had to with the hammer shoes. But I've always kind of worn Dexters. So I knew that I was comfortable with that. And I've always used Dexter soles and heels anyway.
Cool. Very cool.
We talked about this in your game. If you took the psychological exam, would you think that your brain you're more over the psychological, more of a relaxed or more analytical?
Definitely more analytical.
You got to quit doing that. You're thinking too much, right?
I know. It's something I try and work on for sure, because I get in my head a little bit too much by thinking too much. And then I start thinking about thinking too much. So it just becomes a nightmare, because you're thinking about thinking, and it's like, Verity, what are you doing? Like, I have the same issue with sleeping. And that's one of the reasons I listen to the meditation tapes, is because when I lay in bed, my mind starts thinking, oh, what have you got to do tomorrow? Or what did you, or what didn't you do today? And everything kind of starts to go crazy. So I listen to these tapes with the breathing and all of that so that I can learn to switch off my brain. So I think that those tapes have helped me in bowling too, because I can implement what I've used, what I used to help me sleep, to use in bowling.
Yeah, I've seen the great ones. The ones that are pretty popular is the rainfall, or the water, which is a pretty relaxing, program that I've seen also, which is very, very cool. So I think, AJ, we're at 1 o'clock. That's always, let's just go another hour. We're good. But
yeah, no problem. I mean, it's how long Chris has lasted. It was like 2 hours, 2.5 hours or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Before we go, I want to know, whenever you're on a TV show, and a lot of bowlers ask me this, and my kids especially, when you're in the match and you're back there, you're sitting in your chair, are you focusing a lot, of course, on your shot, or are you concerned a lot about what they do, and then focusing on the opponent, or what you can do? You can only control yourself.
Right. So it's funny, because if you'd have asked me this 3 years ago, I would have said, I never watch my opponent. I only focus on me. And I would put my head down. I would do anything to not watch my opponent's shot. But over the last few years, I've kind of learned that I can learn from them. So if I know that they made a good shot on the right lane, the next time they come back on that right lane, they haven't moved, but they go high. That can at least give me some information. So I've started to watch a little bit more, not as much as some people, because I don't like to think too much about, okay, well, they got a strike, they got a spare. I don't really want to know the score all that much, but I do want to watch a little bit, just because it might help me make a decision. If you see that bowler go high a couple of times in a row, then you're probably going to need to move too. So in that aspect, I think that obviously I can't control what they're going to do, but I can learn some information off their shot.
Very interesting. Very cool. And Stu, if you're still watching, I'd love to meet Stu sometime and have a beer with Stu because he's such a cool guy. Beef and Barney. Okay, AJ, I think I love talking to Verity. It's such a cool day, and we love having you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for fitting us in. And I don't know how busy your schedule is currently. I mean, considering all of us are kind of doing what we're doing, but thank you for taking the time to be able to do this. It was definitely enjoyable and good seeing you again.
Yeah, stay safe. I hope that everything kind of goes back to normal in both of your areas soon, and the bowling world flourishes. Everyone, go visit a local bowling center so that we can keep bowling alive.
Absolutely. Yeah. And good luck bowling with the big Nasty. Try to hold him up, will you?
Thank you. Yeah, this year we're both gonna bowl good at the same time because that hasn't happened yet. So you have my word, it's gonna happen this year.
Okay. The wife and I are bowling for the first time, so we'll be seeing you down there. So that's cool.
Oh, brilliant.
Yep. So we'll see you in a little over a month.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. That was fun.
She's cool. Really cool, nice lady. And I'm so glad that she got through that sickness in the early part of the year. That was a little bit scary. But she's such a phenomenal bowler, and her swing is so beautiful. And, you know, I've seen her in person. It's just, I admire that game so much. But it was really cool to hear her, you know, her stories and how it's going with her now.
Absolutely. Her perspective on things is, you know, everybody that we've had on, it's been nice to hear their perspective. She's got the youthful, younger perspective, I think, and it's nice to hear that, pass that along to the kids and even some adults that are listening. I think that's really good, helpful tools to take into consideration for sure. Yeah,
when she came up to Radford and did the clinic with us with Tom, I know the kids just absolutely loved her. The autograph, she's just a sweet lady.
Yeah, absolutely. So chances are we possibly might be missing out Tuesday. It sounded like you might have something going on, Coach. But we may come Tuesday anyway. We'll keep everybody posted like normal. Otherwise, we will see everybody again next Friday.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. We'll see everybody later.